To those attending MCC Boston through our YouTube channel, you too can participate by going to our website at mccboston.org and clicking on the donate button there for that purpose. Thank you for being a part of our church family. Members and friends of MCC Boston, the mission of Metropolitan Community Churches is tearing down walls and building up hope and to be a voice in the international community for justice. But what is justice? We need only to look to the Bible for the answer to that question. From Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 23, and Psalm 10, verses 17 through 18, justice is defending the poor and the oppressed. From Leviticus chapter 25, verses 35 through 36, Job chapter 24, verse 5, and Psalm 107, verse 36, justice is the creation of community and the preservation of people in it. From Amos chapter 5, verses 21 through 24, Micah chapter 6, verses 6 through 8, and Matthew chapter 23, relate the demand of God for justice as being so central that all other responses to God are empty or diminished if they exist without it. And from Isaiah chapter 59, verses 15 through 16, when we carry out justice, we are agents of divine will. Last month, MCC Boston collected money in support of the Global Justice Institute of MCC, which carries out the justice work of our denomination. The money we collected will help equip a building in Kenya with a water collection system, bathroom facilities, and furniture, providing an MCC home to sex workers, queer folk, and other marginalized people in that area. Beyond an MCC church, the building will be used for vocational training, promoting safer sex education, and to address child abuse issues that are rampant in the local schools. Your support of MCC Boston helped to make this justice work a reality. So through your participation, you too are agents of divine will.
The second reading this evening is from Matthew 3:13 through 17. Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John. John tried to dissuade Jesus, saying, "I should be baptized by you, and yet you come to me." But Jesus replied, "Leave it this way for now. We must do this to completely fulfill God's justice." So John reluctantly agreed. Immediately after Jesus had been baptized and was coming up out of the water, the sky suddenly opened up, and Jesus saw the Spirit of God descending as a dove and hovered over him. With that, a voice from the heavens said, "This is my own, my beloved, on whom my favor rests."
Water is one of the most powerful elements on the face of the planet. The flow of water over the ground for an extended period of time will result in a riverbed, and possibly over a significant period of time, a river valley. Water is important to industry, fishing, recreation, boundaries, crop irrigation, and transportation routes. In homes, water is used for cleaning, bathing, and preparing meals. And of course, some of us choose to pay more for water in single-use plastic bottles than we do for the gasoline in our cars. Our body weight is made up of about 60% water. Now think about that. For every 5 pounds that you weigh, 3 of them are water. Our health and our survival is determined in many ways by water and hydration. Science and experience has shown us that a person can survive without food for about 3 tortuous weeks. But humans can only survive for about 3 days without water. We need it to live. Water is powerful and fragile at the same time. 70% of the earth is covered by water, and it is one of the most important natural resources that we have. The lack of availability of clean water is one of the biggest causes of poverty and disease in the world today. Questions related to water rights and pollution are part of the modern ecological movement. Water is vital to the sustenance of humans, animals, and vegetation. When too much water is withdrawn from the ground, earthquakes and sinkholes can happen. Care for the Earth's water supply is essential to the continued survival of the planet. Images of water are part of the Jewish and the Christian texts. Genesis 7 provides us a glimpse of water as both deliverance and destruction. Water is the means of deliverance of the Israelites from their captors in the Exodus. Isaiah 35 and Amos 5:24 depict God's justice in water imagery. John 4 provides a story of the living water with the Samaritan woman at the well. Jesus is found teaching and traveling along water. He utilizes it for healing, and he uses the image of water as a teaching tool. Revelation speaks of a spring of the water of life, and the images go on and on. Water in this passage is for the purpose of baptism. Jesus comes to the Jordan River to be baptized by John, who feels unworthy to perform the baptism. In the waters of baptism, we are connected to God, to our community, and to all of salvation history. In the waters of baptism, we are infused with the Spirit to do God's will. Excuse me. When you go to seminary, all of a sudden people think that you have answers to all of the important theological questions that they can ask. The reality is that we learn more questions than we do answers. Seminary is not the magical experience that some people seem to think it is. One of the questions I'm frequently asked about this passage is, if Jesus was sinless, why did he have to be baptized? Now, it is true that John was baptizing for the repentance of sins. That's covered just a few verses before this. So the only answer I can really give you is that Matthew's gospel was written late in the first century. The early church didn't accept Jesus' sinlessness as Orthodox thought until the 4th century. While Matthew doesn't report Jesus committing any sins, such a notion would have been unthinkable for him. Seminary taught me another question which cannot be answered for sure. Was the repentance for the individuals being baptized or for the nation as a whole? I have my opinion, but no clear answer. Jesus submitted himself to baptism. He was embodying a behavior he would later command his followers to do as they took up their cross to follow him. Baptism is an important sacrament in the life of the church. For many, it is a cleansing of sins. For others, it is an entry right into the membership in the community of faith. And for still others of the faith, it is a dying to the power of sin and the rising of faith and rising in faith and righteousness. Through the revelatory events of this text, the opening of the heavens, the descent of the dove, and the affirmation of Jesus and his coming ministry, we see that this is no ordinary baptism. This baptism is different. In it, we get a clear sense of who Jesus is as God acknowledges Jesus from the heavens as my child. It is a profoundly important moment as Jesus is about to encounter the testing in the wilderness right after this passage, and the beginning of the public ministry right after that passage. We hear the affirmation of Jesus and witness the preparatory act for completing the tasks before him. And we also hear God who says to anyone being baptized, I love you, you are mine, and I am pleased with you. These are pretty awesome affirmations to receive from our Creator. Jesus submits to his baptism as a fulfillment of God's righteousness. Some believe this act was not only a modeling of submission and a consecration of the coming mission. Douglas Hare believes it is also an act of being in solidarity with sinners, standing in solidarity with those who often feel unworthy of God's love and grace. Is a powerful act that is so vividly portrayed in this text and throughout the ministry of Jesus. Most pastors will baptize many people in their career. My preaching professor has baptized people with water from the Jordan River and in a local river. I was baptized almost 8 years ago in a Lutheran church. And I was given a sign of what I would be called to do. Of course, at the time, I totally missed it. As a seminarian, I have helped pastors doing baptisms. I have sponsored a friend, so I'm a godmother. All of these moments are part of the sacramental life of the church. I'm certainly looking forward to the time when I'm allowed to do baptisms. Being part of these moments, whether as a pastor, a parent, or a congregant, means witnessing the magnitude of God's redeeming love and abundant grace in the baptismal waters and rite. Witnessing the coming of the Spirit in this text reminds us that the Spirit comes to all of those who are baptized to empower persons for ministry in the service of God in a variety of ways, as I will remind you during communion. Infant baptism is the primary practice in my tradition, the Methodist tradition, but for others, believers' baptism is preferred. As a Methodist, we sprinkle candidates with baptismal water. Other traditions utilize pouring or immersion, which is a fancy word for dunking. Some have deeply rooted feelings about the modes of baptism. While sprinkling is part of my tradition, the baptismal axiom that many favor is the wetter the better. Splash audaciously. Whatever the practice or the mode, no matter how much water is used, and regardless of the location of the event, the Spirit, like the dove descending on Jesus in Matthew, is present in the act of baptism and infusing the baptized with the possibilities of a new beginning to follow Jesus and do God's will. And it is more important than any flowing water on the face of the earth. Amen.